A few minutes from now, UK Prime Minister Mr. David Cameron will be speaking at a press conference on the London riots. We'll be giving you footages of the briefing and, of course, give you an update of what's been going on so far. We're still tracking the developments following the nationalization of 3 commercial banks rescued in 2009 by the Central Bank of Nigeria. Talking about Afribank, Bank PHB and Spring Bank, now Main Street Bank, Keystone Bank and Enterprise Bank. Sir Sani Nwonsu, the president of the Independent Shareholders Association of Nigeria, is still here, and we're still looking at the development. Thank you so much, sir, for sticking around. Now, okay, all of this has happened, and the central bank has said, I remember the CBN governor saying that he hopes that the shareholders would allow this process to continue and not create bottlenecks. In your camp, the shareholders camp, what is your next line of action? What are we to expect from shareholders?
The central bank governor spoke from the angle that he's not an investor. Because even while he was an investor, he sold his shares and made money from it and destroyed the market. If he is an investor, he will not make this kind of statement because he doesn't know the weight of what he has done. I am quite sure that the courtrooms will be filled with people wanting to actually seek justice.
Is your organization, as a whole, as a body, are you taking the central bank, the NDIC or AMCON to court over this issue?
Well, there's always a process to all those things. I will just leave that to the executive of ISAN to decide what they intend to do. But we should not just allow this to go unchallenged. That is very clear. He knows the weight of what he has done because this is a boast he's actualizing. And we still have senators who were at the public hearing when he boasted that any shareholders association that obtain any ruling from any court in this country that will hand over the institution to NDIC. And I'm happy that even the present managing director of NDIC was at that public sitting. So that's why I said what is going on is not a professional act. It's a vindictive act. Okay. And even apart from that, take it from the angle that we have a Minister of Finance who will be resuming in a week's time. And this Minister of Finance is somebody that had worked in civilized world. She knows the implication of this kind of thing. And the Minister of State, Finance, who is supposed to actually act on behalf, happened to be a staff of Lamido in First Bank. He was an executive director while the present governor was managing director in First Bank. And he spearheaded the demarketing of a bank in this country. So it's something that, well, how do we do it? Let's be smart about it before the person who is holding this portfolio comes in. So, and that's why I am personally not happy with the president on issues like this because we voted for him. We believe that he should have acted and find a way to protect the minority shareholders in this country and the minority people, because the big men never went out to vote like the middle class people.
Okay, now, Sir Sonny, now looking at the entire process, now that these banks have, technically according to the central bank, they don't exist anymore, talking about Afribank, Bank PHB and Spring Bank. Now, what happens to the shares in this bank? Does it mean that the investment, we're talking about billions of shares?
Technically, what it means is that no shareholder of Spring Bank, Bank PHB, and Afribank can lay claim to anything. So it's just like taking your certificate, giving it to a groundnut seller, and asking that a groundnut seller use it to wrap. So
you cannot call an emergency AGM meeting or nothing? No, so it's all.
The court will decide that. It's not over until it's over.
Okay. So what's going to happen to, as I mentioned earlier, from your camp, are we going to see, you're not going to take this, you say you're going to take the central bank to court, but you're not so explicit about what...
My concluding statement is that it's not over until it's over. Because already, presently, there are cases in court. So it's not over until it's over. Let us not preempt ourselves, just like he did by showing us that power is in his hand. It's not over until it's over.
So we should be expecting some more statements from the shareholders camp.
Yeah.
We're still tracking the development following the nationalization of 3 rescued banks by the Central Bank of Nigeria, talking about AfriBank, Bank PHB, and Spring Bank, now Main Street Bank, Keystone Bank, and Enterprise Bank. Now, of course, apart from the fact that analysts and economists have been reacting, we've also seen the markets reacting, talking about the Nigerian stock market. The market yesterday recorded volatile trading. We saw a huge sell-off, especially in the banking subsector. Now, bank stocks were in a record fall yesterday, hitting a 10-month low. We saw the banking index falling around by about 3.6% to an 11-month low, down to 317.33 points. Blue chips, industrials were also in the huge sell-off. The all-share index has fallen below the 23,000 points for the market. We've seen the all-share index declining steadily in the last couple of weeks. It closed yesterday at 22,963.11 points. And now traders are the market talking about the stockbrokers say that the huge sell-off may persist for the rest of the week. Of course, we'll be tracking the markets for you. Now, outside our shows, let's move over to the Eurozone. We're still tracking the debt crisis also in the Eurozone. Now, to help boost investor confidence across the Eurozone, we've seen the equity markets at the Eurozone also fallen to record lows in the last 4 weeks following the U.S. ratings cuts and, of course, fears that Italy and Spain may just become the next victims of another debt crisis in Europe. Now, of course, taking steps to stem that tide, the European Central Bank on Monday bought more Spanish and Italian bonds to help ease the market and calm the market fears. Now, we saw the 10-year yields on the Spanish and Italian bonds falling to 5.39% and 5.3% respectively. Now, over 74 billion euros of assets have been purchased so far by the European Central Bank since May 2010. That was when the ECB stepped in to help rescue Greece. Greece back then received 110 billion euros in bailout funds. Now, of course, we've also seen, tracking the European markets, we've also seen the equities hitting a 2-year low on growth concerns. Of course, there are still concerns over the state of the global economic recovery, which many analysts have said continue to say that it has stalled at the moment. Now, investors, of course, we know, continue to flee equities to bonds. We saw the global bond market on Monday gaining 132 billion US dollars. Now, that's the highest in 15 years, according to analysts. Now, Italy and Spain, who have received some help from the ECB yesterday, have agreed to balance their budgets. Now, both countries are battling huge budget debt burdens. Now, they've said they will introduce more spending cuts to reduce their huge debt burden in exchange for financial support from the European Union and the IMF. Now, don't forget also later today, the FOMC, the Federal Open Market Committee, will meet in Washington, D.C. And, of course, there are speculations that Federal Reserve Chairman Mr. Ben Bernanke may embark on another round of stimulus measures for the economy. Now, we may see the federal chief embarking on another round of bond purchases to help support the economy. We've seen GDP growth, consumer spending all coming in the negative for the month of July. And that, of course, according to analysts, needs the U.S. Fed to come up with measures that will prop up the economy once again. Now, let's see what economic data is on tap this week, talking about economic data from the U.S. Now, for Tuesday, that's today, we're expecting the FOMC to meet. That's the Federal Open Market Committee. They will meet today, chaired by the U.S. Federal Reserve Chairman, Mr. Ben Bernanke. And, of course, analysts are expecting him to come up or to announce some new stimulus measures for the U.S. economy. Also, there will be a 3-year note auction, that's treasuries for the U.S. today. And, of course, despite the fact that equities have been dropping, we've seen the bonds market rallying. We've also seen the treasuries market rallying. Now, that was also a market that investors have run to for safety. There will also be earnings from Disney World today on tap for the market. Now, tomorrow, August the 10th, we're also expecting oil inventories. That's from the American Petroleum Institute. That's a weekly measure of the demand and supply of the oil market in the U.S. Now, of course, this tracks the amount or the level of demand for the U.S. And, of course, analysts have predicted that they expect oil inventories to have risen because we've seen oil prices slipping in the last couple of days. Oil currently is trending at around $74 per barrel on concerns over the U.S. economy. There are fears that if the U.S. economic growth slows, and of course the U.S. is the world's biggest consumer of energy, that would affect prices and of course affect demand for the black gold. So we're expecting data from the American Petroleum Institute later in the day. Also, the Treasury budget announcement will also be made today. We're expecting U.S. Treasury Secretary Mr. Timothy Geithner to give us some data on that. There'll also be a 10-year note auction following the 3-year note auction from Tuesday. Of course, analysts say they expect that auction to rally. Also, they expect that investors would rally at the market. There'll also be a weekly mortgage applications data to tracking the U.S. housing market. Now for Thursday also, that's 11th of August, we also have the jobless claims, the all-important jobless claims to, of course, to measure or to see how well the U.S. Jobs market is growing. There will also be another bond auction. That's at this time, the 30-year bond auction, and of course, some money supply data. And on Friday, the very, very key data, the consumer data, which accounts for 70% of the U.S. economy. Of course, we'll be getting data from that, and that would measure just how much or how well our investors are spending. But in the last the consumer sentiment data for the month of July, or for the month of June, I beg your pardon, came in at just 0.2%. Now, that was a very dismal performance from the U.S. consumer sentiment data. Now, that showed that more Americans were cutting down spending. They were spending less and saving more. We also saw savings, the rate of savings among Americans rising. More Americans have shut their wallets. They're watching their budgets and they're cutting their spending. Also, retail sales is on tap for Friday. And also, we have the business inventories tracking the growth of businesses in the U.S. We're also expecting from some earnings from JCPenney, one of the top department stores in the U.S. As I mentioned earlier, the UK Prime Minister, Mr. David Cameron, will be speaking shortly on the London riots. Now, this is the worst case of riots that the UK has experienced in decades. He will be speaking, making some pronouncements at the press briefing. Of course, we'll be giving you all of the details as we get them. That's a wrap on this edition of Business Morning. Thank you so much for being a part of it. Channels News Track is at 11. I'm Mesta Ubudaga. Bye for now.